What is up, everybody? Welcome back here to the Quarters Podcast. We're talking 2025 draft rankings, getting into all positions, our top player at the top of the board. So, not going super deep here, but we are going to disagree right at the bat when we talk about quarterbacks. We're coming out of the gate hot. But we're going to talk about all these guys, talking about who we like, who's moved up our boards, who's number one, and not a total of agreements. We only have one player. Shocker to who know who that is. That is our number one player all the way through for all three of us. So we're going to be diving into the 2025 class and our top players at each position. All right, let's start with quarterbacks here at the top position. This is where it's going to be fun because I think we're entrenching ourselves a little bit. I think we're starting to feel like put out feelers where each one of us are at right now in terms of this position because it's going to be debated all off season, even now at the end of the season here. Right now, at our top player in the 25 class at the quarterback position, I myself have Shedeur Sanders from Colorado, which hey, I don't know. I don't know how we got to this point, but we're here now. Like, this is where we're at. Randy's got Quinn Ewers still on his board from Texas. And if you didn't know, go look at what Quinn Ewers is going out there on Snapchat. It is a hilarious thing. Go look at it. Go search it up there. QB1 all the way. And then Christian he's Drew Aller. I don't even think I need to say that anymore on this show at Penn State here. So these are our top quarterbacks at the position here in the first quarter. We're going to talk about quarterbacks and running backs. But, Randy, I think the thing that stands out is probably Quinn because I think with Drew, we see it. We see the potential there. Shedeur, he's kind of been up there for some, other, podcast people out there or draft analysts out there. Quinn's kind of had an up and down year, right? But he's bounced back. The Georgia game didn't look great. He kind of got benched there for a second. Vanderbilt had 2 picks. He had 5 touchdowns against Florida. So really, what are we taking away from Quinn Ewers this year? And why is he year one?
So obviously we are still somewhat of a small sample size this year, and I'm trying to give what my grades were going into this year and what I liked about Quinn and what we saw before the injury, really just pure command of the offense and a hot start. I think that's really baked in, as well as the bounce back, like you talked about the last 2 weeks. Since the injury happened, that game especially, and the first 2 games back, the pressure rate against him, the sacks was upped a lot. Kind of in back to what it was for some of his bad games last year. But we've gotten back under control these last 2 weeks with the offensive lines looking better. He's getting back into rhythm. I think he's going to finish strong. And the biggest thing with Quinn, where, not necessarily, I'd say with the other guys, he's got the traits that I'm really excited for at the next level. He's got the big arm. Maybe the accuracy's not there yet, but he's got the big arm. And he's showed the command. He showed all the intangibles I want. And we're kind of picking randomness with this quarterback class. You got to kind of find your favorite. I do think it's close with year 2s as well for this class for me. I think this is my top 3 right now.
So I think it's important to, I don't want to say throw the Georgia game out, but like bringing him back from an injury and then giving him that Georgia defense with what I would call arguably the worst offensive line play, but Shedeur probably laughs hearing this, but some of the worst offensive line play against any singular team that we had seen up to that point. Kelvin Banks Jr. was terrible in that game. Cameron Williams was too. So I don't want to throw it out, but I also, what he did this last week, you could tell he was timid out there. He reverted back to some of those bad habits where the footwork was off and he was kind of just spraying throws all over the place. And kind of timid. But this last week specifically, the footwork was tightened up. There were a few throws where you're like, man, Quinn, what are you seeing? Like, what are you doing out there? But outside of those few throws that he got out pretty early, it looked like the player that I thought was going to go in the top 10. So I totally can get behind this. I think you have to look at the entire sample size. And when you look at it over the last couple of years, like I still believe in Quinn Ewers. He just needs to finish really, really strong to continue being in this conversation, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'm behind that. If Florida was the same as the Vanderbilt game, I think I'd probably pivot slightly. But obviously, before injury, he was my QB1, and we started to see the bounce back. And the schedule they have down the stretch, I do think we could see some good finishes and a good playoff run. I think he cements himself in the top 10.
Yeah. No, he could definitely bounce back in that top 10. I mean, if you were building a quarterback in the lab in 2008, Quinn Ewers is probably that guy. Like, he's probably the 101. Like, that's him. Like, and I think just he's different era now. And I think that's part of the problem here with these guys because we don't really know what to expect, what teams are going to fall in love with, right? Like, Jane Daniels at this point last year, remember, this was the Jane Daniels talk was like, maybe first round, maybe he's in there. He's playing himself in there. Yes, he's pushing that Heisman. And also now he's a top 5 pick in the draft. And now he looks like maybe statistically, I don't want to get Christian on a rant here. It looks like the best rookie quarterback at this point. Like he does moving forward look like that. So I think that's what we're talking about with these guys. Shedeur for me, he's one by default. I think it's very close. I don't think there's tiers at all. I think it's just I'd have these three. Cam Ward, he didn't make our list as number 1 for all of us, but I do think he's in there in that discussion as well. But for me, Shedeur, he's just showing me something, a little bit more maturity now. Like they're throwing the hell out of the ball out there. They don't run the ball in Colorado. So every time he drops back, he has probably less than 3 seconds to throw the football because of his offensive line. But his passing grade has looked really good, 89.3 this year. Turnover-worthy plays, he's kind of turned that down a little bit. Only has 6 interceptions with 346 attempts at this point, and he has 402 dropbacks. That's pretty good based on kind of the numbers that we're seeing out of Colorado. So, and I do think like part of my projection here is I do think he's going to go top 5-ish, top 10. Like I do think he's going to get into that range. So if he does that, then he has a chance to be QB1 of the class. I think he has tools. I do think he stands the pocket well. I do think he layers the ball well. His accuracy has gotten better. There's things that he does well that are translating over there, but it's still like, I can't believe I put him as one on my list, but I think I'm there right now with him. With Cam, pretty close.
If Cam got rid of his stupid decisions, I think we could all make an argument for him to be number 1. But and really, like, I think there's 2 sides of it, right? Shedeur this last week was kind of rough in turning down open guys, but he didn't turn the ball over a whole lot. I don't remember. He might have had an interception this week, but
no,
but.
He didn't have.
Oh, okay. Good. But Cam Ward, on the other hand, is just throwing into tight windows or across his body from the sidelines and doing stupid stuff like that. Shedeur, to me, is a really safe pick. I think he can be a starter at the NFL level. I think he's going to be a good quarterback at the NFL level. I don't think he's a world beater. And maybe that's why I lean into the Drew Aller, because I think he can be a world beater and one of these like top 10 types of guys. He reminds me a lot of Josh Allen. I know a lot of people aren't going to like that comparison, but there's also some Justin Herbert to him. I think Herbert's a good athlete, maybe not a great athlete. I think that's where I land with Drew Aller as well, but just a massive arm doing some really cool stuff as far as throwing to the middle of the field, understanding what coverages he's looking at. I think that's where all 3 of these guys that we have on this list have gotten a lot better this year, is just being comfortable reading a defense and going through progressions. Shedeur, I think, has a little less time to do those things over in Colorado, but he certainly has been, see it and throw it type of guy, which is good. So this quarterback class is certainly still up in the air, though. I think I don't think we're going to have clarity on this until like the playoffs are over. And maybe even then it's like, well, maybe NFL teams are liking this, but I saw recently that some teams still have 1st-round grades on Carson Beck. So we don't know what we're doing out here, NFL. That's bad. Don't do that. Don't draft him in the 1st anymore.
I saw him in the top 5 today. That was interesting. I don't know. I mean, we're not going to get Carson back. We don't have the time for Carson back talk. But I will say this: with all our Ewers and Sanders here, like the one thing to know, all these guys are over 20 starts. I think we check that box in terms of like, obviously Shedeur's a little more than that, and Quinn obviously coming back for that. Well, technically 30 years, so he's definitely been starting a lot longer. The injuries though, it's close with those 2 guys, and Aller there. I do think Aller comes back. That's where my position is with Aller.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm at there. But yeah, the Cam Ward. I know a lot of people love Cam Ward. I see it on social media. I see it on YouTube. You're probably gonna yell at us on the comments here. The decision making is just I've been repeating that myself for like last few months. It's coming to a head now. All right, let's jump over to running back. It's gonna be quick. Like This is pretty simple for us three. Ashton Genty is running back 1, and I think he's in a tier of himself. Like when we're talking about guys that can go in the first round, when you're looking at just the stats this year right now, 224 attempts, 1,700 yards. He has 23 touchdowns on the year, including 3 last week against Nevada. On top of the 200 yards there, run grade is 96.7. And I don't know what the highest PFF run grade is in their history, but that's got to be pretty close for a season. Definitely in there. He's had 38 runs of 10 plus more. He has 90 missed tackles forced. I'll say that again. He has 90 missed tackles forced on the year. He had 18 against San Diego State the other day, 2 weeks ago. His elusive rating is 225. From a receiving standpoint, doesn't have that. They're just running him the ball because they want him to win the Heisman. Him or Travis Hunter, in my opinion, are going to win the Heisman. I'm still Team Travis Hunter, but I understand Genty and everything there. I don't know what more we need to say about this kid. I think he's going to go top 15, top 20, more than likely, in that range. I don't know if a team will buy into him higher than that, but we saw Gibbs go 12. We've seen this happen before with these guys. Anything that we need to kind of talk about with Genty, Christian?
Well, that PFF run grade is the highest that we've ever seen.
I figured.
I did some quick research on that. I mean, they only go back until I think 2010, 2008 or something like that. So I'm sure there's been better running backs, but Javonte Williams, I believe, might have the highest. In 2020, it was 95.9. So he's pacing to have the greatest graded season per Pro Football Focus. One thing that I see often with Genty is he's beating up on lower competition, and I would just encourage everyone to go watch the Oregon game. And like, that's the number 1 team in the country. He was breaking tackles from NFL players. Like that Oregon defense has some NFL players, and Ashton Genty made them look silly. So I would just encourage people to do that. I think the receiving work from last year will translate. I think they just haven't used him that way because they haven't needed to yet this year. I think maybe they're saving that for the playoffs if they make it in. But yeah, just in the Bijan tier of running backs for me. He's my number 1 player on my entire big board right now.
You got anything, Randy?
I mean, this is right now, it's the second best running back season we've ever seen, and I think it'll finish off as the best. He's doing it against every level of competition. He's doing it against 8-person boxes. The kid is just insane. He's standing back there like Michael Myers for a reason, because he is simply murdering defenses.
And it is funny. There is like a weird undertone to his season because the quarterback, I think it's Madsen, whoever it is from Boise State, off the top of my head, will not throw him the football. Like, he is wide open and he will not dump it to Genty. And I don't know what that is. I don't know if there's little gamemanship going on there or whatever, because he could have a better receiving profile. He had one last year, and we know that he's in there. Definitely top 20, in my opinion. That's it. That's all we got to talk about. Those 2 tiers. And then what Chris was talking about earlier about the game against Oregon. If you go look at the other 2 guys out there that are kind of maybe top 5 with, Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, they kind of got shut down against that Oregon defense. And I know it was a bigger game, bigger in magnitude. Maybe the defense was up more in that game. We can't really quantify that. Those are not quantifiable in terms of stats that we see. But Genty ran against that team, and he ran over them and almost won that game. So that is also something to note as well. All right, let's go to the second quarter. Let's talk a little wide receiver tight ends. Our boy Randy can never disappoint me because he's always got something out here for us and these wide receivers. So for us and our top wide receivers in the 25 class as of right now, November, Teteroa McMillan is mine from Arizona, out there at Arizona, and Christian. So we both have him on the season. 63 catches, 93 targets, 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns. Obviously, he's had big spike weeks. He had 200 yards against West Virginia, 300 yards against New Mexico, and he had a couple of other games in there. Kind of been an inconsistent offense on the year. But our guy, Randy, he's got Emeka Egbuka out there from Ohio State. So 62 targets earned, 47 receptions, 587 yards, and 8 touchdowns there. So, Randy, the floor is yours. Why are you leaning Emeka over either him, Luther Burden, some of those other guys in that range?
So, I don't disagree with Ted McMillan. I just want to put it out here for Emeka Egbuka as a guy that was a first-round, second-round fringe guy, most likely going second round last year. We didn't get to see a lot of consistent play throughout all the injuries. I think we're seeing everything that we were wanting to see in the last 3 years from Emeka Egbuka. We're getting the touchdown production from 2022 back with 8 touchdowns already. We're getting good yards per receptions, good games. He's taking over games. He's the first read in almost every play, it feels like, moving the offense. He is a perfect NFL caliber wide receiver going into the draft. He's a lock as a first-round pick for me, and I think that is a win for the 2024 season. And, Ted, he's doing exactly what we thought he would do. And I'd argue we're not seeing a ton of improvement. And I think that's just it's baking into how good Ted McMillan is.
Yeah.
But Emeka Egbuka, I think, has improved in what we've wanted. And I think he's showing what we need to see to just lock in. And even in the big games against Oregon and a loss, 10 catches on 10 targets, 93 yards and a touchdown. He's making the plays you need and cementing his legacy at Ohio State and his record going to the NFL.
Yeah, Kevin, I know you're a big Emeka fan. He's my wide receiver 2 now too. I think he's overtaken Luther Burden, and it's still fairly close. I think one of the main things I wanted to see from Egbuka was just crisper routes. He was always winning on his athleticism and his yards after the catch ability, kind of similar to Luther Burden actually in that regard. And just the routes are so much more crisp this year. He's getting wide open. I think he's a power slot at the NFL level. I think there's some Keenan Allen, Amon-Ra St. Brown to him. I also think if you throw him on the outside, he can win there too. I just think his best work is probably coming out of the slot. And I'll tell you what though, as far as blocking wide receivers go, Egbuka is up there. There are plenty of clips that you can find on the social medias where he's just taking out corners, he's taking out linebackers at times. It's really good stuff. So I don't hate the call having him wide receiver 1, because I think when you look at production and like what translates to the NFL level, I think Egbuka kind of is more of a quarterback friendly type of wide receiver, even though I have Ted. I still love Ted.
He was the easy answer. We just were so confident in the last one. It was obvious. I wanted to be a little different.
Yeah, no, it's fine though, because I like Mecca. We've been a very pro Egbuka channel all throughout every show, everything we've done. I know Jay Stein really likes him. He talks about his efficiency metrics. Last year was a legit argument between Emeka and Marvin Harrison Jr. Like there was a legit argument of who was the better receiver from an efficiency metrics. And to me, Emeka, yeah, you hit it on the head. I think he has a very safe floor as a prospect. Like he is just I think he can go in anywhere. Really, I think he fits every offense out there. There's some I don't want to see him in because, God, there's some bad offenses out there. But there are some that I'm like, man, he would fit well there. When you bring up the blocking point, man, Shanahan would love to have this kid. Like he just fits like that that Niners like just mindset of like what they're trying to do there, and just earning targets and doing those things. And I don't think he'll go there. I don't think the Niners are going to take another round 1 wide receiver. But I've been wrong before about the Niners draft history and what they try to do there. But I'd like to call out. That's why I liked it. I thought it was fun. And Ted's Ted. I think he's a top 10 kid. The inconsistency, though, I think there is something to note with the Arizona offense. It just hasn't been great. But he's still earning targets, 93. I would assume he's going to be in the top 10 of target earners in college football. He's still out there, even though Arizona's having a down year this year, and he's still producing. And when you see that, I still comment to Mike Evans-ish skinnier, but I still think he could be that. But to your point, I think from like a NFL offense perspective, Egbuka's going to check a lot of boxes. I think the guy that's slipping for a lot of people right now is Luther Burden. I'm hearing a lot of noise about Luther Burden slipping down some areas. I saw him as a wide receiver 4 out there for some people, some draft guys, wide receiver 5. There's been noise about him. I wouldn't put him that low. Like he's still a very, very good wide receiver. And I still think he's trending there, but definitely I think Ted's kind of ascended himself into that wide receiver 1 territory in that range. Emeka's in there too, fighting for that wide receiver 2 spot.
Yeah, I wish Ted had a quarterback that was taller than me. I think that's one of the main problems. No, Fafita, he just hasn't been very good.
No.
I know a lot of people saw a little Bryce Young in him, and I mean maybe last year Bryce Young, last year on the Panthers. But
okay, we don't need to take a shot at my boy Bryce. All right, he's playing okay.
Hey, he's looking good.
He's bouncing back a little bit. Okay, yeah, he's still struggling to see, but he is bouncing back a little bit out there. Definitely. Yeah, Noah Fafita. I never understood the Noah Fafita buzz. There was some weird things going on with him.
First round sometimes.
He's a great Well, not this year. I was gonna say he's a great college quarterback. He was a great college quarterback last year. This year, just a struggle there. All right, let's go to tight end, and you're gonna tell me why I'm wrong. That's what their job here is on the show. At 2024 5 class tight ends, who's the best guy at the position? Both of these guys, Randy and Christian, have Tyler Warren, who's looked amazing. Like, let's keep it clear. He's looked very good. 6'6", 261. Out of Penn State. 72 targets, 59 catches this year, 681 yards and 4 touchdowns. I have Colston Loveland, 53 receptions, 560 yards and 4 touchdowns on the year when you're just looking at just the raw numbers there. But Randy, why do you like Tyler Warren as your tight end one?
It's a lot of the big plays, and I think we're seeing enough in the blocking aspect to warrant him, going in the first round to being more of a complete tight end. I do think Loveland has been that guy for the last year or so. I think Warren has just really exploded on the scene. And for me, like, I know he's draft eligible. It's one of those, like, this is his 4th year. I wouldn't be super upset if he somehow was able to come back with Drew Aller and really take over the Penn State world and make them a powerhouse. But with what he's doing in the receiving game at the tight position, he's, besides touchdowns, he's got arguably comparable stats to Mecca Buka, who we just said was dominating college football. And there's a reason he is truly a wide receiver out here for this team and a dominant vertical threat for them. And he's making every play. The routes look really crisp at times too. And he's truly, every game you see, he's really standing out. Obviously, you have that ridiculous 17-catch game against USC, but Ohio State, they did everything they could to slow him down. They did. 4 catches, 47 yards, but you could tell they were hyper focused on him for a reason. I think he could really transcend an offense at the next level.
You mentioned touchdowns. His touchdowns are down on the receiving end because he runs it in every week. They
That's
just
true.
Put him,
Yeah,
they make him the wildcat quarterback, and he also throws passes. This is a style thing. I think what I really like from Tyler Warren is the versatility. If you want to line him up in the slot, he can do that. If you want to line him up as just a blocking tight end, I think he can do that. Colston Loveland is arguably a better receiver as far as like getting open. I think they're comparable after the catch. I think Warren might even have an edge there just with he's a little nastier, I think, after he gets the ball. But I like the versatility of having Tyler Warren where you can do all these cool things, which is what I think a lot of teams want to do with their tight end. Whereas I think there's a chance, like if we're talking fantasy football, I think there's a chance that Colston Loveland is the better fantasy asset because I think he's going to be a guy who gets 8 to 10 catches a week. He reminds me a lot of TJ Hawkinson in that regard, and Tyler Warren reminds me of George Kittle. So those are the two kind of comparisons, and I personally would rather have a George Kittle than a TJ Hawkinson, but for what it's worth, they are graded at the exact same point for me right now. I think Warren's going to have a higher production grade because all the insane stuff that he's doing and the fact that Michigan doesn't have a person who can throw a forward pass on their roster, which could certainly just impact the final grade, unfortunately. But to me, this is a heated race, honestly. I think both of them should go in the first round this year.
This is a style thing for me. You hit it on the head. Like, to me, I love Colston's receiving ability, 88.9 receiving grade. I think he is the best receiving tight end over Warren. I think Warren's fine. I do think Loveland's going to test better. I think Loveland's a better athlete. And like Randy pointed out with Warren, maybe he'll come back. I know Loveland's ass ain't coming back because that team is bad and he's already basically out the door. You heard it after the Michigan State game when he's like, peace out, little brother. I'm out of here. And that's really what you saw with him. He's earning the targets. But think about that. He had 10 targets his last game against Indiana. He only caught 4 balls for 37 yards. I would guarantee those other 6 were uncatchable. Like I saw them. They just, that's what's happening to him as a receiver. I think from an overall tight end perspective, I think that Warren, just because of his inline ability, his blocking ability, I think he's a little ahead of the game there. But I do notch Loveland's pass catching ability. I think he's better there. I think as an athlete, that's kind of where it's a very slim margin though. Like, and I got accused of being a Michigan homer today on social media. But maybe I am, but I do think Loveland from that perspective, like, That's why I lean him just from that receiving aspect, what he can bring to an offense. I want Harbaugh to draft him so bad for the Chargers because I think him and Herbert would be amazing. Him and Quentin Johnson and Herbert in that offense, who shout out Christian, not giving up on Quentin Johnson, scored another touchdown this last week and could be that's a very solid offense with those guys in there, like especially with Loveland there. He's a perfect fit there. Like that is a match made in heaven. And if the Chargers sitting in the back end of the first and Loveland's still there, I have a hard time seeing them pass him up there, and I would love him when that fits. So I'm projecting really where I want him to go and all that. But just from a receiving standpoint, I have him at 1.
It makes sense. And to Christian's point too, and yours, if he had a real quarterback, maybe this isn't as close as it's become this year. I think obviously Loveland had such a huge head start. And, there was some hype for Warren, obviously going to the year with what we've seen in the last couple. But, man, like one has had clearly a better year, and the other one's having a great year despite all odds.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. We're not going to go down the Michigan path. That's the story for another time. All right. Let's jump over to the third quarter. We're talking the trenches. So let's go offensive line because I think these next 3 position groups were all across the board different. And except for defensive line, thanks to Christian. We're all kind of across the board different here. In our offensive line, our top players here, I took Kelvin Banks Jr. from Texas. Randy took one of my favorite players, Wyatt Milam.
Milam or Milam. I'm not sure. So
it's West Virginia. So I'm going to probably say Milam. I feel like Milam is a West Virginia kind of like
that sounds right
there. So Wyatt Milam from West Virginia. Well, we'll see. And then he assumes that area, just like Joe Burrow, remember? And then Christian took Will Campbell, LSU offensive tackle out there. All 3 players are very good, very solid here. Christian, why don't we start with Will Campbell? Because he tends to be most people's OT1 for the most part there. Where are you at with him?
So I want to put a little caveat on this because I've seen a lot of people transition him to their guard rankings because of the projected arm length. I'm personally less worried about that. I think he's a starting tackle at the NFL level because I think the footwork is really, really good. The trench or the anchoring ability against some guys with longer arms is good enough. I think he's got an ability to, keep a clean pocket where I think, guys with long arms can obviously overextend a little bit. It is a good trait to have, and there's a lot of data that suggests that a tackle should have long arms, but there are exceptions to the rule, and I think Will Campbell is that. He's just a great athlete. He moves really well. He's got really good balance and run blocking as well. There have been some games where you're like, man, I wish he was better here. I wish he was better here. But overall, when you look at the last 3 years, really, and all the snaps that he has as a starting left tackle, I feel pretty comfortable that he's going to be able to do the same thing at the NFL level. So he is my one. So we grouped guards together. I do want to shout out Tyler Booker from Alabama quickly because he's still my guard one. I think that he's right there with Will Campbell as far as like overall offensive linemen go, and has a chance to overtake him honestly down the stretch here. But Will Campbell to me, and maybe he plays guard at the NFL level, but I think he's probably an all-pro guard if he does. So I think you try him at tackle, bump him inside if you have to, like we say with everyone. But Will Campbell to me is still very, very good. I think he separated himself from the rest of the tackle class for me.
Okay. Randy, talk about Will, talk about your guy Wyatt. Where are you at with the tackles?
Yeah, I do think Will Campbell's probably still the top tackle for me as well. Just wanted that out there. But to me, I just think we haven't seen enough improvement in everything I've wanted. I think we've seen no, more red flags or anything popping up, no weaknesses, but nothing else really popping out on the tape. Obviously, LSU has been a bit up and down, so that probably doesn't help it. But to me, Wyatt Milam has just kind of solidified himself as a guy that's had 4 years of starting right tackle and left tackle experience. And again, another guy that, even though he's 6'6" and 317, he might have just too short arms for some teams. I do think he needs to get a little bit better on functional strength, but his improvement in the run blocking game this year and still somehow in the passing game has been something I've really enjoyed watching. I only really saw some stuff from last year, and then when we did our mock draft and Kevin put him in there, I did go back and look a little bit more into this year, and I was really impressed with what I saw this year. I do think, a lot of places would probably have him as a day 2 pick last year. I think he solidified himself as a day 1 pick just because of the versatility. I think if you're showing that you can play both sides of the starting caliber, it is the Big 12, so I give some pause in that. But he's played both sides. There's a possibility you have to kick in, and maybe that gets rid of some of the length issues. I do think that you definitely need to work on your functional strength in terms of just trying to root players out at the D tackle position. But with that being said, constant improvement, and I always love to see that from offensive linemen and really becoming a leader of the offense. So I think versatility will shoot him up the draft board as well, and I think he's just got to finish strong, and he's a first-round pick no matter what.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, I wonder if I regraded him as a guard, if I would like him more. I'm not super high on him as a tackle, and I like to do that sometimes where I just kind of flip him. Maybe the length is, I couldn't really pinpoint why I didn't love the tape, and I think it's probably the length now that you're mentioning that.
It's a little bit of length and a little bit of foot speed from what I saw, and then the functional strength. So when you get the B gap counters, the stonewalling there has been a little bit up and down, and then just a pure speed pass rusher. He's got the technique to get back there, but he does trip him up sometimes.
I will say with the class as a whole, if he's a tackle, like he is going to play his way in the first round, I think, because when you're looking at everything, when you look at the numbers and everything, you're like, like for example, like Randy's bringing up, run block grade 88, pass block grade 90, just from just a standpoint of like doing everything pretty good, pretty well. He does that. Like, and yes, it's at West Virginia. Yes, the conference isn't the best, but there are question marks there. But like I've been going back in this class and just going through the offensive line rankings, man, there's holes in every one of these guys. Like when you're talking about it, like even Campbell has holes, like, right. That, if the arm length, you want to talk about that, inconsistent tape this year. I mean, I probably took the biggest risk in Kelvin Banks because I think from a pass blocking, he's one of the better pass blocking tackles in the class, 6'4", 320, 92.5 pass blocking grade. He's looked good at times at Texas, and he's had a lot of snaps. So like he's, when you look at it, he's had over 2,400 snaps since he played his freshman year. So he's been out there. He's consistent there. Run blocking though, man, he has some really bad technique. Like he struggles, and I think he reaches a lot. He tries to use his athleticism too much, and it comes back to bite him. And we've seen like tackles like this where you buy that athleticism and it kind of bites you in the ass. Like the Giants have done it multiple times in drafts. Like you're like, oh, you're taking that upside tackle. And I do think Kelvin has it, though. I think he is, when you're looking at just from pass blocking perspective and athleticism perspective, like I could see a team believing in him and drafting him top 5. I could see them doing that. I could see like, hey, love his tape. I love his, if he comes out this year, there is a chance he maybe goes back to school. But I could see a team believing in that raw upside athleticism talent. So that's why I lean with Kelvin Banks, because I think all these guys kind of have holes on the offensive line perspective there. And I don't really... there's not a lot of like tier for me, like in between these guys. A lot of kind of jammed together right now.
It's not a good class. I mean, just being upfront, like I see a lot of potential in this class, but I know, but it's just not like one of those classes where, like last year even, where you have JC Latham, Joe Alt, like guys that can play on some level at the NFL level. I feel the most confident about Will Campbell, obviously, but like outside of that, it's like this is a lot of upside shots where I hope a lot of these guys go back to school for their sake, but I do not hope that for the NFL's sake, because there's going to be some a lack of options. I think just there's not that many seniors that are very good, that at least first round worthy. So it's not my favorite class in the world for sure.
Yeah, I get that. And even to your point for last year, we knew Joel was a first round pick. Besides that, it was a bunch of upside question marks, and guys like Latham and Fuanga and a couple others really fulfilled that need that we needed. I'll agree that I don't think we've seen that. And that's why I really wanted to put Milam on here, because I think he's arguably one of the only ones we've seen improvement from, even if it is minor. And the last thing I want to say about him, 3 total sacks in 4 years. That was his freshman year starting. I just want to point, that's insane. 3 total hits on the QB in his career, 2 of the freshman year. For a guy that has question marks of size, strength, and length, that's insane.
Every draft season, we see it like we'll see a guy like this that we're like, well, what's his upside really going to be? And then he goes to Steelers in like the second round. He's an all pro. Like we always see guys like this where you're just like, hey, yeah, we saw, we should have noticed that. Hey, yeah, he hadn't given up a sack or 4 sacks in his whole career. Why didn't we take more account into that? And then you kind of just talk yourself out of it. Why they take like a guy like Banks because they see that upside and that elite, and then they don't pan out. But I do think it's an interesting class because I think you're starting to see like a lot of draft analysts talk about like only having like 7 round 1 guys. The reason why is because the tackle class and the offensive line class is so bad. That's why we're seeing it.
7 round 1s and 4 of them are blue chips. It's an insane draft.
Yeah.
That's the funny part as you're going in it. All right, let's go over the defensive line because you guys have a love affair for Walter Nolan for the Ole Miss defensive lineman, 6'3", 305 on the year this year. When you're looking at it, he has 459 snaps, so he's looked good there. When you're looking at just overall, just his raw numbers, 3 sacks. 22 hurries, 21 tackles, 10 assisted. Definitely is one of the most athletic upside guys in the class. Walter Nolan has always been that. When he transferred from Texas A&M, that was always there. He is a true junior this year, so there's a chance he possibly comes back to school. I don't know what the NIL bag looks like out there at Ole Miss. But Christian, you talked about on your big board, you really like this kid. What's your take with Walter Nolan being your guys' defensive line 1 right now?
So he's my number 2 player overall. And I can acknowledge that that's probably going to be an outlier compared to other draft analysts, but every time I watch this kid play, I think, that's an all pro at the NFL level. He's winning with so much power and strength, and there are some pass rush moves in there. I think because he's able to, so he's doing that against SEC level offensive line play, which we just said offensive linemen across the board are down, I guess, in college football, but it's still super impressive to see him just throw his hands into a guard and knock him back 3 feet. Like, that's not stuff that's normal or stuff that I remember seeing too much out of, like a Javon Kinlaw, who I really liked because of the athletic upside. Wasn't even close to what Walter Nolan can do as far as just strength, power, hands, and then just the burst and the versatility. You can line him up. I think he's got the strength to play nose tackle. I think he has the to play 3 tech, and he kicks out and plays some 5 tech as well. And so when you have that ability to play, you can be a 4-3 defensive tackle or a 3-4 defensive end and be super impactful. I say all this, Mason Graham's like my number 4 player. So like this defensive tackle class is, I think that's my favorite group overall. So it's not even knocking Mason Graham. I think he's been remarkable. And I think from a like winning with pass rush moves perspective, I think Mason Graham is probably still it. But to me, Walter Nolan just has an upside that not many players in this class can reach. And so I have him very high. I think he's going to be an all pro.
All right, Randy, tell me why because this is new for me. I feel like you popped him up after you've listened to Christian. So that's a dangerous precedent. That's a dangerous precedent to follow here.
It's all right. But I'm always happy to call Christian out whenever it's needed. So that's okay too. And I just said in the last one, it's a name I knew, but when Kevin put him on there for Millum, I went back and looked a little bit more into it just to see the pop and why is he coming in the back of the first now. And it was kind of the same early in the season, though, with Walter Nolan, because he came out very strong. He transitioned this defense into being very, very good for Ole Miss. They're averaging less yards per game for everything, and he's really the focal point. He's become a backbone of a defense, and that's something that I am always looking for. You're maybe not getting these elite stats every time, but if you're truly impacting the game and changing it in every way, and you're able to move around like we've seen, and that's another reason why I'm starting to fall in love with him, because then you're getting into that comparison territory of Donald and Jones, where you're affecting the game from everywhere. You have an aggressive, powerful, dominant hands at just a 6'3" frame, an aggressive first step that's just getting away from everyone. If you put a single block in front of him, he's dominated every time in the SEC. So there's a lot to love. There is some stuff that we need to get a little bit better. You said he could play nose tackle. I think we're going to need a little bit more functional strength from that. I think he is just dominating with, that quick hand right now on that level, but it's there though. Like you could see every part of it. That's the crazy part. And when you have versatility at a D tackle position, that you're going everywhere for this defense, you're becoming a true weapon. And this is a guy, you put him for Minnesota. I mean, that's game changing with Flores.
Yeah. I have a player comp that's gonna get me canceled here for Walter Nolan. Do you guys want to hear it? Let's do my first defensive player comp out here.
Yeah.
You know who he reminds me of? Because I'm old. So preface it. I mean, I'm sure these boys watched him when they were like in 4th grade. Warren Sapp comes to mind. When I watch Walter Nolan, man, like I just see that motor. You see his kind of disruptor on the inside, and like he's not there yet as a player, but you just when you watch him, you're like, man, he's got a little bit of Warren Sapp in him. Randy didn't like that comp, but that's all right. I'll live.
But the only reason you don't, and that's why I said starting to get in that kind of comp territory for the guys I said, is because we're getting to that realm. You're putting a visual out for people, and that's really the issue. But when you think back to like freshman year of Sapp, where he's transitioning from tight end coming into Miami, like and already making an impact, that's what we're seeing. Maybe a bit undersized for what he's doing, like height wise, but he is making an impact in every play.
Man, I guess maybe I'm just too young. I thought Warren Sapp was a little heavier. He was just
by the time
300.
you remember him, yes.
Yeah, that's fair.
By
the
time
he was,
I want to say his
off of
playing weight
Tampa,
was
yes.
like 300, 295, and Walter Nolan is like around that too, right? So
yeah, good comp.
Yeah, I think he's 6'3", 305.
Yeah.
Randy, I am glad you mentioned the Aaron Donald, and I know it wasn't to comp him, but like the power reminds me of that a lot. And I don't like to throw that out because like that's a first ballot Hall of Famer, but also I can't shake that when I'm watching him play. So that's just
and
me
it's not
getting
even
over my
just
skis a bit.
Yeah, it's not strictly the power for me. It's that punch mixed with the speed, because like he's not JJ Watt, or with the size, the length, and the power and the speed. Like that guy's obviously a freak of nature. This is a guy that's working for everything he's getting, but he's dominating right now. I think against the top tier interior offensive linemen, and especially tackles with the pass rush moves he has, he's gonna get beat right now. But you see the little spots that you want to see for the next level, and this is a guy that is going to rise up the boards for the draft because of the intangibles.
Yeah, the real big thing with him, and we'll move on to mine, which is Mason Graham from Michigan, is just consistency. He just got to be more consistent, and he's done it this year. I think the consistency at A&M was the big reason why he wasn't up there as high as we'd like. But hey, to me, Mason Graham from Michigan, I'm gonna be a homer. I was looking at my picks, and I'm like, shit, I'm gonna be called a homer here. But Mason Graham, 6'3", 320. One of the best run defenders in the game in college football. Like he immediately, you draft him, he changes your defenses up front from a run defense perspective. Like he can do that very well. He just destroys defense or offensive lineman blocks. He's able to get off of them quick. I would say he started a little slower this year, but he's really ramped it up as the season has gone. One of his best games, I thought, was the Illinois game. Unfortunately, a loss, but he looked good there. Like against USC, he looked amazing. Like there's games that you really notice about him. 5 sacks on the year, 18 hurries. The one area that I want he needs to get a little bit better at, I think as a pass rusher is where he's not as good as maybe Nolan has shown, or maybe that upside hasn't been there. But I think that he is a top 10 player. I think he's a disruptor up front. I think he is one of the best, and I think he's gonna be better next year. I think his scheme this year has been bad, but with Mentor last year, like he looked like one of the best players in the college football. So I do think that when he finds himself in a scheme, a coaching staff that knows how to utilize him better than what we're seeing with Michigan this year. I think it's been a lot of line up and just go, which he can do, and he's shown that he can do this. But I think when they get him involved, a little bit more in the defensive side, coach him up a little bit. I think Mason Graham can be a stalwart. And this is that defensive line class. Like, this is a solid class, like Christian talked about too. These are some very good players in the top 5 of these guys.
Yeah, just on that front, I have 4 defensive tackles inside my top 13 right now without production grades and everything. And maybe that's just, I really like this class more than most, but yeah, Mason Graham's my number 5 player or number 4 player right now. So elite player.
It's the strength of the class. I'd probably say the strength of the class with the depth and the blue chip top end talent. And, that spells Mason Graham. He's not to rip Kevin, he's the safe pick for the defensive tackles because he's the one we knew. He's the obvious choice. And I think I feel like if you go back to my picks, besides obviously Ashton Jeanty, everything has been like, okay, this year has been great, or I've seen something this year I really liked. And I think that's why I went with Nolan. But Mason Graham's the obvious thing. And you want to talk about player comps. For me, when I see him, I see Christian Wilkins.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that guy's a dominant. I mean, I think the highest paid D tackle in the league right now after this offseason, and there's a reason for it.
You heard it here first. You're getting Christian Wilkins and Aaron Donald in this draft, folks. So
okay, we didn't say that. We said we saw something.
Heard it here first.
I'm taking safe.
It's Gregory Rousseau. How about that?
I'm taking safe to the bank, baby. That's what I'm doing. I'm taking safe to the bank here to drafting these guys. All right, let's wrap this up. Let's go to the fourth quarter. We're going to talk about our linebackers, which I don't know, man. This class of linebacker is just a mess, in my opinion. Then defensive backs, we'll get into that. As far as linebackers go, our top at each position here at the linebacking class, I have Jahad Campbell out of Alabama. I'm going to classify him as a linebacker because I'm cheating, kind of. Randy has one of my favorite guys, Jay Higgins from Iowa. I think Jay is a very solid linebacker. We actually talked about him in one of our first shows. We were mentioning him as being kind of just a guy to like notice out there. And then Deontay Lawson from Alabama for Christian. So where are you at with Jay Higgins, Randy? Why is he your one?
So this is the style of linebacker I like. I did. This is a bit more of a throwback. Obviously we talked about other linebackers like this, but this is somebody that is going to just sit back in the middle, clean up everything, and just make plays. It's not going to be a lot of flash. He is getting better in coverage, and I think that's why I desperately wanted to put him on here, because obviously this is 5th year playing, 3rd year starting, and he's already a 93.2 coverage grade this year so far, and really helping solidify this Iowa defense to what they have been for the last couple of years. I think he's been, at least the last 2 years for sure, has been the stalwart of this defense and making plays everywhere. Only 1 sack this year, so you're not getting that blitzing aspect that you're getting from some of these other linebackers like Christians. You're not getting the top coverage like Christians either. And maybe we're not the top athlete, but I know for a fact I can draft Jay Higgins, and on day 2, I can sit him in the middle, and like Nick Bolton, I'm not going to have to worry about anything out the middle. Like, as long as I put a good D tackle in front of him, we're going to be a top 15 rush defense.
That's totally fair. He reminds me of Ivan Pace Jr., who I was kind of low on
Without
just because you sure. Yeah. I mean, I think Pace, the thing that makes me think of him is just undersized, super undersized, where I think it's a struggle to get off blocks at times. But when you incorporate the coverage ability, like we've talked about, different styles of linebackers, and there's a flavor for it. Higgins kind of is a blend of both, as long as he's coming clean behind the offensive line. I think where I struggle with Higgins a little bit is just I don't see a whole lot of block get off when he is rushing the passer, when he is getting pretty muddy in the trenches there. But I'm with you. Like, this is a day 2 player that I think, could be, and now the size might push him off a day 2. I don't know. I would take him on day 2. That's where I have him graded, but he's just a solid player, and has been, like you mentioned, you like seeing guys get better, and that's exactly what he's done for 5 straight years. So that's always a good thing.
All right, let's talk about Lawson. Where are you at with him, Christian?
Yeah, I mean, not to be a Debbie Downer so late in the show, but I don't love this linebacker class, so I'm just gonna take the the upside of a guy who I do think can play downhill really well, but also just shows off incredible range, incredible change of direction, incredible athleticism. I personally, just being upfront, I get burned by these athletic linebackers though. So it's like I hope that athleticism translates to being good at the NFL level. I think where maybe I've gotten burned before is identification, gap discipline, things like that. I think Lawson is really, really good in those areas. I think he sees the line of scrimmage really well. I think he sees the field really well, which is something you definitely need. I think him and Campbell have very similar attributes in that regard. I think Campbell is certainly a better coverage player, but I do think that if you need a run run stuffing type of linebacker, Lawson is the go-to. And I think some team's going to fall in love with him when he has like a 9+ relative athletic score in this class. Because I think when you look up and down this linebacker class, it's not like I said, not to be a Debbie Downer, but it's just not very good, honestly.
Yeah, it's gonna be hard. That's why I don't mind the Jay Higgins pick, because it's more of like, hey, this guy can fill and play. He might not be an all-pro, but he can be a player for 5 to 7 years, or just be that guy that kind of fits in our defense. For me, I had Jihad Campbell. I mean, kind of what you said. Brandy's gonna say I cheated, but I made this pick before the LSU game, so I want everybody to know that, because the LSU game was his best game out there.
You did. I'll give you that.
Yeah, 12 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 2 additional pressures out there, pass breakup. Like, he had a really good game this weekend. And so the safe mantra that Randy has pinned on me, I picked him before the game. And then the part of it, when I was looking at it, just really what stood out to me is his ability, his versatility and coverage. Like you mentioned, like he can do that pretty well. And I do think he can really kind of, he can cover guys in a slot. So like when you're looking at this, he also has some special teams experience there. Like he does all the little things that you like from him. They've talked about him being fluid. He has a pretty good twitch to kind of get rid of blockers in his way there too. Long arms, impressive size as well. He's athletic. I mean, like Christian talked about, sometimes you miss on these guys because that just doesn't pan over to the NFL side. But I just like him because of his versatility. I don't think that he's the thing that probably is the red flag for me is football IQ, as opposed to Lawson, which is there. Like you're like, oh yeah, this guy's got it. I don't know if Campbell has that all the way. I think sometimes he can get stuck on an island. I think sometimes his rush defense, he struggles there. I do think that he doesn't understand gap. I think that he kind of just uses athleticism and gets downhill quickly. But sometimes that doesn't pan out for him. Also position wise, what is he at? Is he just going to be a specialist? Is he a pass rushing specialist at that linebacker position? So there's some question marks there. But I don't know. I think that all three of these guys, and there's a lot of other linebackers in this class, where it's really just going to come down to scheme and where they get drafted.
I think one main thing to remember when considering that is Campbell's a true junior and Lawson is a true senior or redshirt junior. So another year of playing, I think, will give Campbell that football IQ, that football intelligence, and being able to read the defense. But I mean, I think you're right. There is a difference there when you're watching the film that maybe I am more inclined to go with Lawson because of that.
Yeah, I need to see more. I think I think the Georgia game was decent, at least, rush defense wise. And this was obviously a coming out party, felt like, against LSU. But, you're a second year starter. I do think you've improved this year for sure. It's kind of like, can I see what you really are? And I think that's the big thing, because we are getting a lot of box snaps, and I'm curious if they're going to start moving around more because he's a bit undersized for that. But I do think he's going to be very good. I just don't know what his ceiling is right now. Maybe that's I need to see more of him.
All right. Well, good. I'm glad you don't like him, because now you can't accuse me of being safe. Well, let's
missionary Kev over here just going to save that.
Well, didn't go on the next one. I'm going to get skewered for this in the comments, but we're going to leave this one for last. Defensive backs, top players at each position here, the defensive back spot.
Michigan.
I took another Michigan player. I did not mean to do this. All right, listen, their record does not reflect what they do on the defensive side. That's Martindale's ass out there. I don't know what's going on out there. I took Will Johnson from Michigan. Randy and Christian took Travis Hunter. Now, before I let them talk, I don't know how much we need to talk about Travis Hunter. The thing with Will Johnson that I want to say, this is how I'm going to qualify this pick. I'm going to say this. If Travis Hunter solely decided to play corner and that was it, he would be cornerback 1 for me. Like if he's like, hey, I don't want to play wide receiver, I'm not going to go out there and try it. I'm going to sit here and play corner. To me, he would be the most talented corner in this. I don't know if that's going to happen, though. I think he does want to play wide receiver. I think corner is his best position, though, and I wish he would just focus on that corner position. He is a very good wide receiver when he needs to. I don't think the nuance there, the route running, those type of things that you're looking for is there. But on pure athleticism, he's good. But if Will Johnson's there and he's just going to play corner, I think he could shut down half the field like he already does done in college since he's been in college there. I think he can be your cornerback 1, and I think he is a difference maker. I still think his top 7 pick. I think he is an elite prospect in this range. Like you're looking at it like, hey, blue chip guy. Will Johnson is a blue chip guy. So is Travis Hunter. My quantification just comes down to who's just going to play corner. If it's Will Johnson, then I will take Will Johnson from that standpoint. And then I'll leave Travis Hunter playing that cornerback wide receiver thing because I just don't know how it could work. I think if he has packages and depends on the team that gets him. Like if it's the team and they know how to use them, they're not going to overuse him at one position or the other. But give me Will Johnson here just based on those qualifications. And he's a damn good corner. Will Johnson is a shutdown corner.
He's also like strong. And I think, I do have my concerns about Hunter's actual like strength if he has to play heavy press coverage. I think if you need a corner that is versatile, can play in every scheme, I think Johnson's your pick. I think Hunter gives you more upside as far as like instincts go. His click and close is just a little bit better, but Johnson is still up there. I mean, these are 2 borderline blue play. I mean, Hunter's a blue player. There's no borderline about it, but like Will Johnson's right there too. I guess not concerned, but like, did he quit? I think he quit. I think he quit on this Michigan team. And I think maybe some teams are going to catch on to that. He had 2 bad games right in a row. And then he got hurt in that third game. And then he hasn't played. We'll see if he comes back and maybe he didn't quit. But I think some teams will have some questions about that. But outside of that, super clean prospect. Kevin being a homer is justifiable here. I think you can make an argument. I've seen Will Johnson as the number 1 player on a lot of people's boards. So I think you can make a very clear cut case for Will Johnson being the best corner in this class, even if I don't have it that way right now.
Yeah. I mean, he's phenomenal. This is fair. We knew going into this, Michigan had 2 of the better defensive players in the country for this season and for this draft. He should be a top 10 pick.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's it. We wrapped it up. We talked about every single position here. In the comments, drop it. What do you think? Who's your best player? Who are some guys that either we missed or some guys we should go watch? Like guys that you think, hey, I know you guys are some of you degenerates out there watching your teams and you say, hey, you're missing this guy. We really like this edge out here. I know I get it every time I put a mock draft out. They're always like, oh, you missed this kid. I'm like, well, all right, give me his name. Let me go look and watch him and kind of go through there. So give us your guys' list. Give us out your position. Who's your top player for each position? We'd love to have that discourse there. Make sure you subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on the podcast, leave a review. We need those reviews. We transferred our feed over. So any 5-star reviews that we can get to kind of plug that algorithm will help us out there as we get ready for draft season. But it's November. It's getting close, boys. We're getting there. I saw the first Senior Bowl invite got sent out. And so it's draft season. So we appreciate you guys. We will check you guys on the next episode.